Welcome back. In this episode, we're going to do a bunch of computer-related items, and before I go any further, I want to mention that I am using a temporary microphone for this particular video because I don't have my lapel mic, and I wanted to do something besides just screen capture footage like I did in the prior episode. There will be some of that in this video, though, because it's just easier to switch over and do that than to try to aim the camera at the screen. But while I am recording some footage here, I'll just kind of pan around the room and show you the various tasks that are on hand. So what you're looking at right now is my wife's computer, and what I'm actually going to do with this is we're going to take the 250 gigabyte hard drive in here and we're going to move it over to a 120 gigabyte SSD. And there's a couple reasons why. First of all, while SSDs are faster than hard drives are, however, the size of the SSD is smaller than what I have on there currently. Now, I did manage to get the computer to get down to about 95 gigabytes worth of space for a 120 gigabyte hard drive. That's still a lot, though. The idea was I was going to use the existing drive in here as a backup drive externally, but I don't need to do that, and I'll explain as I go what all these different hard drive swaps are going to enable. But first off, this one here, going over to the actual SSD from the hard drive, like I said, it's going to give me better speed. And this computer, it's not really old. It's still it's an i3 processor, but it's the second generation. It's running at 3.1 gigahertz, but it needs a little boost. And I think switching everything over to the SSD is going to make it run a little faster. What I'll end up doing is I'll use the SSD as the main boot drive. That's where Windows will be installed. Any major programs you want to work speedily. That'll be on there, and what I'll do is I'll take the other hard drive, the one we're replacing, that'll stay in there, but it'll become a data drive, and that way all the pictures and movies and music and everything that she could possibly store, and some other programs that you don't necessarily need fast, or things that aren't going to really get improvement from an SSD, like let's say Office. Office doesn't need to be on an SSD, so we can put all those programs onto that. We can put the page file onto that, so we're not writing to the SSD continuously. There's little tweaks, but we're going to do all that at some point. Maybe not in this video, but this one's just going to be cloning the data over, getting everything moved over. That'll be a pretty good improvement for that machine. It's already got 8 gigs of RAM. I mean, I have, like I said before in another video, 16 in my machine. For what she does on her machine, she doesn't really need 16. In fact, 8 is kind of underutilized, but it's just not responsive as it should be. It is running Windows 10. It was Windows 7 prior when we got the free update, so that's what that is. That's on the desk there. When we go to actually view it later, we're going to remote into it. I can pan down real quick and show you. This is a desk that has a keyboard and mouse drawer built into it, which is really awesome. And I have a KVM, which is a keyboard video mouse switch, a KVM switch they're called, behind the desk. It's a 4-port. So one of those ports is hooked up to here. If you look, I'll zoom in just briefly. There's a little cubby over here with a blue VGA connector, and that's USB there. There's 2 USB connections, one for keyboard, one for mouse. So you'd hook up, this is actually number 4, so you'd hook up like a laptop or another desktop here on the desk. And then there's a connection down under the desk here, which goes to my server. And that is actually just behind that chair. It's just a tower computer, nothing special or fancy. But that particular machine is the Windows Home Server that I talked about before. So anyway, there's a little button next to the keyboard there that if I press it, I can switch between one of 4 computers, and that monitor, keyboard, and mouse will be hooked to that particular machine. There's also an 8-port network switch back there, as well as a 4-port router. The network switch is a 1 gigabit switch, and the other ones are just your standard 100 speed. And I did that just because all the computers, like the server, my computer, my wife's computer, they all are on a gigabit network, and it's pretty speedy. Now that I'm going to get the server taken down, all that stuff's going to live on a hard drive. There's really no need to run it. In its place, I'm going to have an actual tech computer where it's just a desktop that I can plug other hard drives and computers into. I kind of do that with the server now, but you're not really supposed to do that kind of stuff on a server. That's supposed to be more of a secure thing for your data storage or whatnot. But what's going to happen is all these different computers in here are going to get kind of hard drive swaps. So like I mentioned, her computer is getting an SSD in place of a hard drive, and the hard drive is going to become a data drive. But since I'm getting rid of the server, this won't get backed up anymore, so it'll need a backup drive. Well, in my computer, which is located over here, has its own SSD and 1 terabyte drive. When the server gets all the data transferred, that thing's going to actually have the 2 terabyte drive come out of it and go into my computer to replace the 1 terabyte drive, which frees that up to become a backup drive or something else. In fact, actually on top of this computer, which you can't really see, is my 1 terabyte basically YouTube drive, and that's got all the raw data for everything that I've ever shot, period. That's a Western Digital green drive, which isn't a really speedy drive, so I might actually use that as the backup drive and then maybe put all the stuff on the other drive, which is a Western Digital black. Just, it's a better drive, a little faster. That's the really only difference between the colors. There's like green, black, blue, red, and there's all sorts of different ones, and they all have different uses. You know, for what I'm going to do with it, having a green drive is going to be perfect for backups. So once I get everything all laid out, that's going to be, you know, how I'll have to end up doing it. So that'll take quite a bit of time, because, you know, just to transfer data, it's going to take a while on its own. On the server, I've already transferred a lot of the stuff over to an external hard drive that I just happened to obtain recently. Big 2 terabyte drive. So that's going to be a kind of a temporary drive, and that you can kind of see right there on top of the actual server next to a 4 terabyte backup drive. That 4 terabyte backup drive will also sit on top of my computer, and that'll be my computer's backup. This will all make a lot more sense once I actually get into the environment, the computer environment here, and I'll show you all that stuff. Also, while all this stuff is transferring and we're waiting and I need stuff to look at, we're going to look at these 2 machines here. I have no idea about any of it. I was just handed these because someone knows I like old equipment, and they said, here you go, take this stuff. Here's a couple old Xboxes. I don't have power supplies from them or anything, so I don't know if they work or not, but that'll be stuff to play with. The Xboxes for sure in another video, but since we're doing computer stuff, we're going to look at these 2. Now the top one looks like it's a little bit more modern. The bottom one, I can't tell on the camera if this is going to make much sense or not, but that's a big case. That's actually, I want to say it's a full ATX. It looks like a full ATX, or maybe more like a mid-tower. It's pretty big, but it looks old. It's got a floppy drive on it. It's got 2 CD-ROMs. I'm assuming that's all IDE. I don't think there's any SATA in this. I haven't looked at the power connector. I haven't even opened it. I know the top one is really dusty, and that's why I have this machine out here. This was given to me for Christmas this year by my parents, and I have to say this was actually a really handy gift. It's a small vacuum, but what's nice about it is I keep it in my van. If I do a project someplace, I have my own vacuum. I can clean up my mess. But what's really nice is it makes a great computer vacuum. It's nice because it's bagless. You can just dump it out, and you know, when I get the computer pulled out, I can clean out behind it, do all that stuff. So that's another reason why this is up on the desk. I could have just pulled her computer out, plugged the hard drive in it, slapped it back in, and then just remote desktoped into it. I didn't need to put it on another desk like this, but it just gave me a chance to clean everything out. And while I'm showing you that, I went through and just asked her, you know, what doesn't she use anymore. She's more into like those just small games like Angry Birds and, you know, things like that doesn't take up a lot of space. She's not playing like Call of Duty or stuff like that. She doesn't have any like heavy hitter games on this thing. But out of all those smaller ones, you know, when you have a bunch of them on here, they do take up, you know, not a lot of space. It's just a lot of stuff. Like there's a lot of stuff on the desktop. Some of these things auto update or whatever, so that's burdens on the machine when it loads up. So if you can just get rid of that burden of stuff that you don't need anymore, it's just less weight you need, I guess, when you go to transfer everything over. But on that computer, I did that. I did a virus scan, a malware scan. I did all that kind of stuff just to make that hard drive as clean as possible, so when I transfer everything over, it's not going to have any issues. And the last thing I did, I realized I had to actually edit a video on that computer one night when my machine wasn't working. So I transferred all the raw data to it, and there's actually a little hard drive sitting up on top. This is just a small 120 gigabyte. This is actually a DIY kind of case thing. I'll have a video about this one day because it's actually a really neat device. But anyway, I have that set up, and all the raw data from that particular shoot was just transferred over there. And that was actually maybe about 10 gigabytes worth of stuff. So it adds up really quick when you do these episodes. But that much space I don't have to worry about transferring over now because it doesn't need to be on the computer. So you get the idea. It was originally over 120 gigabytes worth of space taken out of that 250, and once I cleaned up all the stuff on there, ran CCleaner a couple times just to make sure there was nothing on there, it ended up working great. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to do a couple brief things, and I'm going to get the other system set up where I can actually show you some screenshot stuff, and perhaps we'll come back to this camera in just a few minutes afterwards. And here we are in the desktop environment. We're going to go through the 3 different machines on my network all on this one screen. So if you take a look real quickly into my Explorer here, you can see how I have this set up. Drive C is the SSD, drive D is the hard drive, and all the main programs are actually on C and everything else is on D. And I'll actually show you this here. Now this is the before shot. This is the graphical version of what I explained before, so you can kind of see how this is. Now I color coded each hard drive so you can see when this moves from picture to picture how this is going to work. So on the server on your left side there, you can see the main hard drive is actually a 10K RPM drive. It's a very fast spinning hard drive. Normally it's 7200 RPMs. So I put that there as the main drive, and it's partitioned so drive C is 80 gigabytes. That's all you need for Windows Home Server. So that's basically all the program files, everything you need to run the home server operating system essentially. And then the remainder of that is a 200 gigabyte document drive, and then whatever's left that you're not seeing in the list there is basically the recovery drive. You can't access that. Then there's a 2 terabyte drive that's in there. It's actually a Western Digital Black Enterprise Edition that's meant to be run all the time, which is another reason why I'm using that in the server here. And that's actually the client backups. So as I mentioned, every night the server backs up to 2 client computers. That's where they get stored on that drive. And then the remainder of that space is where I have the pictures, videos, and music files. And the videos are when I get done rendering the file, that's actually where they go after I upload it to YouTube. That actually sits on my computer during the upload, and then it goes on the server afterwards. And external to that server are the 2 hard drives. Currently the Western Digital Green drive with a USB 3.0 interface, and that's where the raw camera footage goes. Again, once I'm done editing stuff, it goes through the network over to that drive. And then there's the large 4 terabyte my book, and that's on a USB 3.0 interface as well. That's all inclusive. I'm not sure what speed that's running at or anything like that. I just bought it as an all-inclusive solution, and twice a day the server backs up to that. And that's, I can go in there and I can get files. I can actually completely rebuild the computer from an image actually, which is pretty cool. So then you see in the middle is my computer, how I have the drive C and drive D as I mentioned. And on that computer, there's most of the programs sit on the 1 terabyte drive because it's just better for the SSD that way. Like I said, I don't need Word to open fast. It's not going to make any difference running it on the hard drive versus the SSD, so it just sits on the hard drive. No real changes, on that computer or the wife's. You can see she just has the main drive. This is as is right now. And if we go to how it's set up kind of now, you can see I moved, first of all, the hard drive from the server over, the external one that had all the camera files. I moved it over to my computer to actually get the rest of the stuff off of there, camera related, and put it on there, because for some reason the server, while it works 90% of the time, there's a good chance it doesn't work sometimes. And I noticed when you try to copy files over it, you don't have the right permissions to do so, and it's something to do with certificate not being passed upon between the 2 machines. And I can transfer files back and forth between my computers and the wife's, and she can go back and forth to the server, but I can't go directly to it sometimes. I can read files from it, but I can't write to it. And that's part of the reason why I'm taking it down too, because it's just more trouble than it's worth. So I brought that over to transfer the rest of the stuff over, and then on the server side of things, I hooked up a 2 terabyte drive, and I copied over all the data files from both hard drives. So you can see now there's nothing listed under D&E, so effectively they're empty. And I'll show you that if I go right here. You can see here's 199 of 201 free, and the other one still has the server backups on it. It's just not going to clear off yet until you physically delete it. So if I go to the users here, you can see my name is listed here because I haven't removed my PC from it yet, because I'm still in the middle of doing all the file transfers. But the wife's computer behind me, there's really nothing of importance on there to honestly to back up. Everything picture wise, all that really is on just this one computer or the server, and she accesses it through through the network, through like the home group and stuff. So it's not important right now to have a backup. So in the next couple days, it's not a big deal. But I will eventually have another drive on there. But until then, mine still needs to have a backup. So I'm just going to have that running on the server for now. But hers was just removed. I removed the link on her particular machine. I can also show you that. Here's hers here. And this machine, is no longer connected to the server in regards of backups or maintenance. So I had to do everything, like do updates and do all that stuff manually through the computer like you normally would, which is fine. That's not a big deal. You can set that up to automatically do that anyway. And you can see already, I got this to have 30 gigabytes free from 16 just by moving the swap files over and moving all these other things. Now, I'll briefly show you, if you go into any of these things, like this is your library, by the way, where your desktop and documents and downloads and all that stuff goes. Normally this would just go right on drive C until you tell it to go someplace else. So if you actually right click on any of these and go into properties, you see there's a tab for location, and it would normally say C:/ like user and so on and so forth, and then downloads. I just deleted that whole front part and changed it to the D drive, so it's just D:/downloads. And then when you hit apply, it'll say that this drive folder doesn't exist. Would you like to create it? You hit yes, and then once that creates, it's going to ask you if you want to move everything, and then you should hit yes, and that'll transfer everything over. And it works out great that way because it just migrates all the stuff, and you can do that for the desktop folder, everything. So, for example, not all, but some of these icons here, whatever you do on the desktop. So if I go in and do a new text document here, if I go over to the drive D, you can actually see there's a desktop folder, and that new text document is physically located there. So it's not writing to the SSD. There's other folders that you can't see, like the temporary folders, stuff like that. I can show you briefly how to do that too. If you go into properties, you actually have to go into this PC and then go to properties. You go to advanced system settings, and it's under environment variables right here, actually is where it is. And you can see I have the temporary drive located on the D drive here, and I also did that the same here. I moved the app data temp drive, and it just stores basically garbage files. It installs stuff when you install something, and then once the installer is done and your program's installed, that stays kind of full. The stuff just stays in a temporary folder until either you delete it or the computer deletes it after a while. But why have that take up space on the SSD if you don't need to? That's just extra writes, just extra little things you can just tweak. If you're interested in knowing more about this kind of stuff, tweaks and things, ask in the comment section below. I'll be glad to do videos on this kind of stuff. So that's basically what I did in her machine here, and that actually went by really quickly. I couldn't show you the actual process of swapping all the files because it actually booted into a special program. Basically, I used the Cronus True Image, and you set up all the variables in Windows, and then the computer boots into a special program that does that. And it didn't take long at all. It copies one for one. It's pretty quick. And once it was done, it just rebooted the computer. I just went into BIOS and just changed the boot order so that SSD would boot first, and then the whatever would boot second, and so forth. And once I got into Windows, I just formatted the drive and then copied everything over. So it was a really smooth process. It took 45 minutes tops, I'd say, honestly. It took me longer to make this little diagram here. And don't think this took a long time. It sounded like a while. It should have took longer, but a lot of this is just copied and pasted. And I'll show you, here's the after. So there's the server removed. I should mention, let me go back to the during. What I want to do is while I have the files from the server on the external hard drive, mentioned here, the yellow one here, you can see. That one, what I'll do is I'll copy it over. You can see here's the after. I'll copy it over. It's hooked to my computer, and I'll move as needed the files over. Nothing on there is really super important right away. A lot of things are like, I have a ton of NES and SNES cartridges, ROMs. You know, that's Nintendo, Super Nintendo, for emulation purposes, and PlayStation games, and they're big. They take up a lot of room, and a lot of them are redundant, and I have to go through them all. The music I have on there, there's 140 gigabytes worth of music that I've collected over the years. But I had a little thing where I used iTunes for a little while, even though I don't have any Apple devices, and it changed a lot of the files over to M3U or whatever format they use. And I still have the WAV or the MP3 or the WMA version of it there too. So it's like a lot of stuff's doubled, and it's just, my whole music collection is kind of a mess now. Not only that, but another program that was supposed to rename and redirect everything over to, you know, its special folders and say like, this album's this folder and this song belongs in that folder, and it didn't do that. It just created a whole bunch of new folders, and it just completely messed up the whole organization I had to my music collection. You know, I guess if you're just using a program to manage it and you're just looking for artist name or album name, and it just crawls and looks for the tags, it's not a big deal. But I'm old school. I like to used to be able to go to the folder, and if I wanted to, you know, copy a specific album to a thumb drive, let's say, I can just look for the folder that contained that album, and the album name was the folder name, and I just copied it right over. And now I just got this mess. This is kind of what I want it to look like, where, you know, certain things, this is just stuff I had off, you know, online, but the stuff that's sitting on that server, it's a mess. You can see here, it's supposed to be each one's an album, but there's no artist name in front of it because it was various. It's just, I can go on and on about just this music folder. It's not fun. That's what happens, I guess, when you collect all these things. Anyway, so I'm gonna actually go back to using the camera now. That's all I really wanted to show you on the computer here, and we'll see you in just a second. So I decided to put my computer up on the desk and take this 1 terabyte green drive and pop it in there just to copy the stuff over from my computer. And as you can see in front of you here, you have the 4 terabyte my book, the 2 terabyte external drive, and the 2 terabyte internal drive. So once the files are finished copying, what I'm going to do is put that 2 terabyte drive in the computer, take the green terabyte drive out, and then copy everything over. I'll actually clone that drive, so that way the existing 1 terabyte black drive will copy right over to that 2 terabyte drive. I'm pretty much going to keep all the data that's on it as it is. I don't need to sort through it as of right now. And then I could take the 1 terabyte green drive and put it into an external case and throw that onto the wife's computer for backup. And then while we're here, I'm going to put the 4 terabyte drive on top and get that all set up and get that ready to do its backup. And as I mentioned, when I need the data off of the 2 terabyte external drive, I'll start copying that over. A lot of that's like program files and just different things, the actual installation files, I should say, for older software or just different things. I tend to make copies of stuff that way, so I have it. I can install it right off the network. So that was the intention of that. And that stuff, for all intent and purpose, may end up going on another server, like I mentioned in an earlier video, possibly getting one from work, an older one that's a little more powerful, obviously, than what I'm running here as a desktop machine. It's an actual real server. But anyway, while I have this whole thing pulled apart, I decided, well, it would be a good time to vacuum it. And when I put the front cover back on, I noticed that I had some intermittent connectivity between the positive connection for the power LED and, of course, the LED itself. So what I have going on here is I just redid the whole thing. I noticed that all the connections going to those lights were kind of wonky. And that's to be expected from pulling this case open and close as many times as I have over the years. I actually swapped the LEDs out when I originally bought this. So you could see the red and white and the green and white leads there. The red and white ones for the hard drive LED and the other ones for the power LED. And just underneath this switch, just between the switch actually and that bundle of wires is where that would actually go. And I'll show you what it is. It's a little plastic holder with the LEDs just mounted in it like that. And they were just glued in with some epoxy. So I just popped them out of the epoxy and just re-glued them in. And I'm just waiting for the glue to dry. And then I'll actually just put that back in place, resolder the leads on. And everything's good. And of course, there's already heat shrink on the leads itself. If I actually scroll back up here, I'll show you that. You can see the little black pieces right there as the camera zooms in and focuses too quickly. Well, anyway, you get the idea. They're on there, so once that's soldered in place, I'll just pull those over the wires and put that back in. This is the case I mentioned that I spray painted the inside of. This was all bare steel. It came out pretty good. It's a bit dusty in here now. I did vacuum it out as best as possible, but this will get completely cleaned out. Oh, and why I have it in frame, I've never really talked about it before. If you take a can opener and run it along an empty beer can, soda can, whatever, you could take the top of it off, and with a file you clean it up and everything else, and you can actually make it into a little cup holder like this. It's pretty useful. Anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and solder that on and let the computer finish copying. You can actually see on the screen in the backdrop there the little green bar graph. It's almost to the end. So there shouldn't be too much longer, but I'll get that done. We'll swap all the drives out, and it should be it. And here's how it looks finished. You can see actually I bent the leads downward to prevent it from breaking again. There's no weak points this way. Before they were sticking straight out, so now you can see they're bent downward, so it relieves any strain that are on these wires. Also, I put a generous amount of heat shrink on here just to protect it. And these lights are actually just a touch brighter than what was in here prior, which is pretty good too. Now we're on to another day and the end of this particular video, so we'll take a look at everything that I did. First, going to the server. Everything is completely cleaned off this. You can see by looking at the hard drives here. If I actually pull up management here, there's only the one drive, disk 0. Everything else is obviously removed, and you can see how I partitioned it into drive C and D. That's as well as it was before. What I actually did was I recreated whatever folders belong there, as you can see, or you can also go into the dashboard, which is where I did this, and that's listed here. I just rebuilt the directories, more or less just went and just moved it where it belonged. And I also removed all the users. This is just for the local login here, but there's no computers listed. As you can see, there's just the server. And it says that backup's not set up because I had to remove that, obviously, and move it onto my current machine. So now this can actually get powered off. It's serving no purpose whatsoever. It's not even connected to the clients to do like Windows updates and stuff. That does it all manually. So I will disconnect this. Actually, what I should just do is shut this off because we will no longer need it. So goodbye, server. I'll put this to the side. This will be something maybe we could play with another day or whatever. You know, like I said, it's 2011, and you know they discontinued this already. So once I possibly get one of the other servers from work running, we'll revisit having something managing the home network here. But it's not really necessary, especially how I have it set up now. And I can show you the wife's computer is actually doing a backup now. I took the 1 terabyte drive that was out of my computer, the Western Digital Black, and just threw that in an enclosure. The reason why I did that at first I had all the raw data to copy off of the old 1 terabyte green drive and put it over to the 2 terabyte external drive, and I set that up to make that happen, and I was just having issues with it. So I just put that drive actually back in my computer and used it hooked up through the SATA connection to transfer the data off of it. So that meant I couldn't use it in the enclosure, and I had that other drive floating around anyway. So I just put them together and as mentioned, put that on the wife's machine. And that's what's backing up now. But the problem was, I mentioned way back in the beginning of this video that I had a problem with that enclosure with eSATA. And I thought it maybe was the machine I was running it on, and it turns out it wasn't. And then I kind of forgot about it. And when I used her machine, I was having the same issues. I didn't think about, I had problems with that port before. So I even tried the second hard drive, and that's when I noticed, oh yeah, it's definitely something wrong with the eSATA connection. The computer wouldn't restart, or when it finally came up, it just took a very long time. And then once you shut the power off to the external hard drive, it booted up right away. Even if it was hanging up for 10 minutes, as soon as you shut that off, it went right in the Windows afterwards. You didn't have to reboot anything. So I ended up just using the USB 2.0 connection, and that worked fine. Certainly much better than it was before with the eSATA connection. So I'm not sure. There must be something wrong with the controller board. But nonetheless, as you can see, it's backing up. And I did set this to change every day. Now, this is Windows 10, but we're using the Windows 7 backup, which allows me to pick everything if I want on the hard drive. So it's actually making a system image. And then it also has individual file backups. So I can go through and actually download a file from the backup that I might be missing without having to go into the system image. That's more for system images is more for if you want to actually back up the computer, or I should say restore the computer on a 1-to-1 ratio. So if you fry everything, you can make a recovery disk. Technically you should have that before everything fries, but if you get your recovery disk, you could throw that in there, and then using the system image, you can re-image the hard drive, and it's exactly how it was 1-to-1 at the time of backup, obviously. So that's kind of doing both in Windows 7. Windows 10, it's more like it just saves what's in the library. So you still have to install Windows, but perhaps it's easier now with Windows 10. I understand activation, you're basically activated through the cloud now. So once you get Windows 10 back on, you just have to log in with your username and password for your Microsoft account, and it should automatically re-register. And I'm assuming it'll have a list of all the apps that are installed, just like how Android and the Apple devices work. So I'm sure that's the way Windows is going. But like I said many times, I'm kind of more old school. I like the Windows 7 approach to things. Just Windows 10 gives me little things that I like better over in Windows 7. Although Windows 7 I really loved a lot. And of course before that was XP. But anyway, so her machine I'm calling good. Everything's fine with that. It's got all the drives set up the way we want. And I can show you that the SSD actually has only 28 gigabytes of space used out of that 111. And I noticed after I restarted the computer a couple times, that changed drastically. So it must have, scaled down the temporary files it was holding and everything else, and whatnot. And the page file and everything finally moved over to the D drive as well. So if I could show you in here, this is all set up just the way I want it now. So her machine is running much better. In fact, unfortunately, I don't have the numbers to tell you the before and after by the number, but by the feel, it feels like 5 minutes were taken off this computer's boot time. In all seriousness, if you don't have an SSD in your computer and you use it quite a bit, I highly recommend changing your hard drive out. For one, at this point in the game, they're cheap enough, and it's definitely an upgrade that you'll see an improvement on for sure. At least get one of those hybrid drives that's a spinning platter hard drive with SSD components in there. So what ends up happening is it uses the SSD as cache. So when you save something, it saves it there, and then when the hard drive catches up, it ends up copying the stuff to the hard drive. So you notice the instant speed of writing to that solid state space basically, and then you'll end up getting the benefit from having a large hard drive afterwards. But anyway, yeah, so this is running perfectly, and I'm just going to close out of this for her. The backup will finish. We don't need to be in here anymore. On my machine, you can see we already did the backup. This worked fine. And at first, when it did it, my library, which I could pull open here, the library here had some locations on the server that don't exist anymore, so couldn't save those folders, obviously. So I had to just fix those errors. But everything's fine here. You can see actually there is quite a bit of drives. What's going on now is this folder here is actually being copied over. It's quite a bit of data. This is all the raw video footage. It's coming off the 1 terabyte Western Digital green drive that's mounted in here on the SATA connection, which I think is this drive here, and it's moving over to this one, which is the USB 2.0 drive. And then I'll take that one out when it's done, put that away someplace, don't need it. And the D drive is the one that we moved over. This is the one with all the data. This was cloned. Everything here is one-for-one perfect copy as it was earlier. And I'll be moving over certain things, like if we go in here, the documents, the pictures, the movies, the music, anything like this will be moved over to my hard drive in this computer. And the rest of this stuff will probably just live in here, and I'll just disconnect it and keep it safe for whenever I need it. And there's no sense powering up a hard drive for data I'm not going to really access too often. And that's really it. I know I covered a lot of little things in this video, but you know, such as life, sometimes you have to do a lot of little things at once. Hopefully I get the lapel microphone in soon, and we should go back to doing regular videos on the desk. I watched some of the footage back that I did the other night, and that microphone that I was using during the video stuff, it was good, but it wasn't what I'm used to using, so definitely would like to go back to that. It's not that it's an expensive item, it's just I gotta get around to ordering it and getting it here. I am going to have some stuff soon I'm tinkering with the Raspberry Pi and things like that. So hopefully we can get that up too soon. Well, anyway, thanks for watching this video. I'm going to put a couple links to some other stuff in the screen, and also a link to subscribe if you're not already subscribed now. And as always, as I mentioned, please make sure you have notifications enabled so you can actually get notifications when my channel uploads videos. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.